Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, the podcast with real leaders talking about real crap they've faced and what wisdom they've gained. And today's episode with Kevin Lavelle is such a joy to share. Kevin has a very interesting background where he was the founder of Mizzen and Maine, totally shifted gears and became a two-time founder, is now the co-founder of Harbor. And he was able to share the importance of brutal honesty with yourself and with everyone around you as you're doing hard things and making cool stuff happen. I know you're going to really enjoy his authenticity and the wisdom he shares. So thanks for tuning in. All right, welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is. And Kevin Lavelle, thank you so much for being here. Kevin is an unexpectedly two-time founder, two different businesses. One as a founder, totally different experience, and then now as a co-founder of Harbor. So give us a little bit of an introduction to, first of all, what in the world triggered you to start two different companies as an entrepreneur, and where are you at right now?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be able to share about my experience and, of course, what I get to build. I'm currently CEO and co-founder of Harbor, and we have built a much better baby monitor. The leading baby monitor on the market failed my family, and I learned the hard way that apps on phones are not baby monitors. So we built a camera and a monitor that connect directly to each other without internet, and both devices also connect to the cloud. And that's a really great first product, but we are really even more excited about the things that it enables. We've created something called a remote night nanny, where you can get all night eyes-on expertise to coach you through the depths of hell of sleep training for as low as $25 a night, and then expanded into additional kind of telehealth and telemedicine options. I started that in 2022 and have had that idea since my son was born 8 years ago with that experience. And in a similar vein as to kind of why I started Harbor, I had this aha moment. When I was in college, I watched a congressional intern run into a building soaked in sweat, and he just looked absolutely terrible. And when his shirt dried off an hour later, he looked even worse. I grew up playing golf and watched performance polos take over on the golf course and wondered why no one had ever made a dress shirt out of performance fabric. And that sort of inherent curiosity and questioning, and an unbelievable level of naivete to think that I can solve these problems, and belief in the art of the possible, led me to want to start Mizzen and Maine in 2012, and Harbor in 2022. And for context, Mizzen and Maine today is carried in about 1,000 stores. We have 11 of our own. We've done hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We're backed by L Catterton, the world's largest consumer retail PE firm. We did a couple major celebrity endorsement deals. And then we worked on Harbor very quietly behind the scenes for about 18 months before we sort of announced ourselves to the world. And we started shipping product in September of 2024. And it's been an absolute rocket ship ride. Very different than Mizzen and Maine, but also both consumer products, both mass market consumer products, with some of the same challenges. And so, learned a lot the first time, and thought I might be able to short circuit some of the pain and heartache that comes with being a founder the second time. And I was both right and wrong in that assumption.
Well, of course, that's what I would love to get into, right? Is those real life experiences that were surprising, confusing, and where you took your biggest lessons, right? So, can you give us an example of something that was an unexpected hardship, maybe even the second time around? Because you had started a very successful company, and then you co-founded a second.
Yes.
And as you said, thinking, I'm ready for this. I got this.
Yeah.
And what I have found as a trend in most entrepreneurs is a healthy dose of over self-confidence, which I share, right? You call it
Sure.
naivete. But if we knew what we were getting into, we probably wouldn't have, right? So, what was a big unexpected hardship with Harbor, and what was your big takeaway? How did you overcome it?
Um, when I went down the thought experiment of starting Harbor, I talked to a lot of very bright people in the world of entrepreneurship and venture. in building Mizzen and Maine, I just self-funded and then raised some angel capital and then raised some more angel capital. And it was very much, buy 1,000 dress shirts, try and sell them, buy 5,000 dress shirts, try and sell them. And I didn't hire anybody for a long time because I couldn't afford to pay anybody, and just sort of ground it out for a couple of years before that flywheel started to turn. To build something as complex as two disparate pieces of electronics that have to work together with very high uptime, very high cybersecurity requirements, millions of dollars in R&D, even without going the most expensive route, and we could talk about the different manufacturing routes. But the more cost-effective route is still millions of dollars to get a product to market, many millions. And so you have to raise venture capital in order to be able to do that. And so before I decided to go all in, a lot of very smart people who I trusted and understood their, lens on the venture landscape told me, with your background and your success story with Mizzen, you will be able to raise millions of dollars on PowerPoint. And by the time I started the process of actually fundraising, this was summer of 2022, the venture market had just absolutely, you could either say hit a wall or drove off a cliff, maybe both. And so the fundraising experience has been much, much, much harder than expected. And, in some respects, I learned that a friend I met through this process told me, you have to remember that the websites for venture capital firms are marketing materials for their LPs. It's just marketing fluff. When they say, we want to partner with entrepreneurs who want to change the way the world works at the earliest stages and be the first check. And then you go, hey, that's me. And by the way, I have this track record and we've got all of this like early proof points that we can do. They're like, ooh, call us at your next round. And then you call them at the next round. They go, call us after you launch. And then you call them at launch and they say, call us 6 to 12 months after you launch. It can be very discouraging, especially when you interact with these people. They're very bright and they're not lying. They also just put forward the marketing material that positions them in the way that they want to be positioned. And so how did I overcome it? No, there's no answer to that other than just not giving up. And it has been much more difficult than expected. But finding every which way to just keep going and then putting demonstrable, inarguable proof points on the board. So we said we were going to do this by this point, we do it and we go back to them and show them. We said we were going to do this by this point, we go back to them and show them. And we just keep doing that. And we find, ultimately, I have found more success with family offices and angel investors and kind of more non-traditional investors. We do have some venture in, but it's just a very different experience than I had kind of anticipated going into it. I didn't think, oh, this will be easy. I just didn't think it would be this brutally difficult.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, you've had this really interesting trajectory of seeing these problems that no one was solving, challenges, got excited about it, but you've had to have an immense amount of resilience to keep the energy up and keep going when things are really hard. And I'm always curious when I know in my experience, I hit these moments where things aren't working, and then I realize like it was me, right? Like there's a mindset shift I needed to make. There's a risk I hadn't been willing to take. There was something I wasn't admitting, right, about what was happening with the business, the industry. So can you give us an example of where you've been your own worst enemy as you've been growing the business side or just the culture internally? What was a big takeaway that you learned from that and a shift that you made?
Yeah, I think the most straightforward answer there is falling into the trap of focusing on what's on fire rather than the longer term or what's actually the most important. It can often feel like what's on fire is the most important, and that is often the case, especially in the earliest stages of a startup. And so the way that I resolve that is coming back to just taking your time and writing out what are actually the most important things that I should be doing this week, this month, and what might be something I can get rid of. I can just punt. I can respectfully decline, hand off to somebody else.
Mhm.
And then being accountable to, I have a great forum. We've been together for almost 8 years, a group of 8 entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And we go through these spouts where we'll, post on a accountability channel. What are the things that I'm going to get done today, to make sure that we come back to it and, just writing it down for someone else to hold you accountable to
Mhm.
um, is helpful. And we are, our entire company, um, we have 12 team members right now at Harbor. We're all very professional, accomplished, sophisticated, workers, employees, owners, whatever. And so it's we don't need to like sit there and check up on each other's work, because we all know generally the things that we're marching towards, and we have OKRs and we have weekly alignments and all of those things.
Mhm.
But like Tuesday, what has to get done Tuesday, in the world of very early stage entrepreneurship, um, often that is you just sitting down and being real honest with yourself, and that can be very difficult.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I've often wondered and explored like why have I not been able to be honest with myself? Like what was the barrier, right? And usually we're just clinging to something
Yeah, sure.
that we don't want to let go of, right? So, and that clinging, that kind of threat response of I need things to be a certain way, like you can go into all kinds of psychology around that, right? But it leads us to do stupid shit.
Yeah.
And as I see that a lot in even really experienced senior leaders, when you're creating this high performing team and leading internally. And I would love to hear challenges that you faced in shaping a high performing culture and helping a team to navigate through change when they're all clinging to something and resisting and having that threat response.
Yeah, look, I think we have a unique team, and we're so early in many respects in Harbor. I think I would maybe revert back to some of the things that I experienced in building Mizzen and Maine.
Right.
Um, as a team gets to 20, 30, 40 people, it's real easy for priorities to seem aligned, and small differences in understanding can result in massive differences in outcome or
Mhm.
performance, and kind of territorial nature. And so um, ultimately, it was at Mizzen and Maine was my first experience in. We decided to go down the OKR route, and there are different ways people implement it, and it means different things to different people.
Yeah.
But very clearly, looking at what does the end of the year look like
Hmm.
if we do things right? How do we break that down into quarterly progress markers?
Right.
And then how, as a leadership team, do we help our team understand trade-offs?
Mhm.
Because an additional dollar in revenue in this channel may seem like the best direction of those resources, but actually we're going to prioritize this channel while
Mhm.
not sacrificing that channel. Okay, what does that mean? Let's talk about that in practice so that the team can understand when they face those things. Um, One of the best conversations I had with a team member one time, it was on the branding and creative side. We sort of outlined not rules of engagement or rules of the road, but very clear brand guidelines. That he said it to me in a way that now seems so obvious, but I just hadn't thought about it this way. He said, I want to understand, if you and I can't sit down and make a decision, how would you make that decision so that I can then use that to make the best decision with the knowledge that I have, even if I'm not engaging you. And it is important to help people foster that understanding of directions and goals, and the values of the business, and what are the trade-offs, which brings me to one of the my favorite book recommendations, to Ben Horowitz's first book, Hard Thing About the Hard Things. I recommend it to everyone who's ever, if you've worked in a company, you should read the book, but especially if you're a founder or early stage team member. But then his second book, What You Do is Who You Are. And he gives lots of examples of leaders and the types of ways that they build culture. And ultimately, words on a screen or words on the wall in the stairwell don't mean anything. It is
Mhm.
all about how decisions are made.
Mhm.
And so um, being back in the earliest trenches of startup, grinding out the first year of sales is both really exciting and really draining. I love the ability to create something new that most people don't believe is possible. I also really, it's not that I pick one phase over the other. I like the next phase a lot as well because starting to get into tweaking strategy rather than trying to just literally mold something out of nothing. I love that the speed at which that happens and the feedback loops that you get. It can take a while. I mean, we started building the Harbor product in August of 2022, and we shipped prototypes in the middle of 2024, and we started shipping mass production in September of 2024. That is a long time to go before you're testing ad messages and you're testing creative. And there were ways that we did that very small, but until you've got lots of people using your product and giving you that feedback and understanding what's working and not working, I love, we launched a program middle of December where we call it the Great Baby Monitor Swap. And basically we said, if you had your baby shower 6 months ago, you may not love the product that you have, but you just had a baby shower where people bought you all the baby gear. You don't necessarily want to go buy more if you don't have to, because there's a lot of stuff when you're, a new parent. And so we created a program where we'll give parents up to $200 off if they sell us back their current baby monitor system. And then we work through a secondhand website. We wipe it, we sanitize it, all of that, and then upcycle it and sell it. And that means it doesn't go to a landfill. And we can help people who already have a product switch. And we've had hundreds of families switch into Harbor. And those are the fun things where it's like we have this brainstorming session about what's working and what's not working. And out of the discussion, we said, look, there's going to be this subset of people who just got something. They're outside the return window, and we know that they would switch. What's a way for us to do that? While also not just saying, let's just start throwing discounts around, because that is a very false trap that almost everyone falls into. So anyway, I'm rambling there, but that is an example to me of how to think about framing what goals and priorities and trade-offs are so that people can make those right decisions. And then I love this next phase where we get to start making decisions at speed that can make a real impact very quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, that's been a lot to navigate, Kevin. So, and you're solving a really interesting problem because people do, I've had that same experience, right? Where I'm like, well, I already have this, but I think this other thing would be optimal and we're not willing to let go.
Yes.
So, really getting inside the minds of your prospective customers.
Yeah.
Love it. So, I'm wondering too, as you're shaping, you had to shape the culture of Mizzen and Maine, and now Harbor's starting to grow. And of course, you're kind of outsourcing some. Not everything needs to be internal, but as you look at your current team and growing it, what do you think are those important cultural elements so that people are aligned and making good decisions together?
I could talk about this topic alone for an hour, so I'll just pick a couple very salient points. One is just transparency and honesty. We've shipped a weekly update to all of our investors, advisors, and then we started hiring team members. It took us a while before we started hiring.
Mm-hmm.
That outlines everything and how we're operating, how we're doing, what's working, what's not working, what's our runway, and what are we doing to fix, problems, and where are we focused moving ahead. And I had versions of that in terms of transparency with Mizzen and Maine. We were very open about a lot. But with Harbor, ultimately, my experience this time around was I saw some incredible entrepreneurs that shipped regular updates. And I just decided from the beginning that I was just going to do that. And every single week for the last 2.5 years, we've sent an update about what's working, what's not working, challenges, progress, all of that. And I do that certainly for our investors because I believe that I have their money and they deserve to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then for our team members, we do regular, all hands meetings, and the all hands meetings, we don't need to cover that much because we ship a weekly update and everybody knows already what's going on. But it's a chance to like double click in and ask questions about things that are happening. But we've hit multiple moments along the way that have been very precipitous and very difficult. And we've had 100% retention rate of everybody along the way, even through those difficult times, because I've been able to say, look, here's the challenge that we're facing. Here's how I think we're going to fix it, and everyone stuck with us. I've been very grateful for that. And with a lot of the folks that I work with now, I don't spend much time with them because I'm not on the development side. And Charlie, who's my co-founder, spends all the time with the development team. And when I built Mizzen and Maine, we were all in person every single day, no matter what. And with Harbor, we've been remote first from the very beginning, largely because the people that we've hired have been all over the country. And I would not have been able to hire the talent in the way that I did if we all had to be co-located.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a forcing function when you're remote to drive exceptional transparency and honesty if you want to build that trust and that partnership. So that would be one. And then I think the other piece is just trying to be as realistic and respectful of the fact that people have lives outside of work. I have two young kids. As we talked about, I recently underwent a pretty significant surgery, and I've had some family health issues in the past. And I want people to know that like the expectations are very high for exceptional work and performance. But if you've got something that you need to take care of, I trust you. And, you don't need to tell me where you are. Take care of what matters, because you're going to hand that work off to somebody else. Or you're going to let people know what you need covered while you do X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is that's just the way that I would want to be treated, like an adult, and not someone tapping me and asking me, "Hey, I noticed you weren't on email for a couple hours yesterday. What was going on?" That's just an absurd way to do anything, let alone run a company. And then, the third thing, just ultimately given what we're trying to do, is we're mission aligned and helping people connect to why we're doing what we're doing. We are changing families' lives, parents' lives. We're changing infants and pediatric, like kids' lives, through the work that we're doing. Eventually, as we roll out into more complex areas of kind of pediatric and postpartum care, it will be all the more consequential, the work that we're doing. And so it's cool waking up and working on something that we know has a very direct impact on people's lives. The customer testimonials we get, we obviously share wide, but celebrating those wins that we have with customers as often as possible.
Love it. Love it. So hearing a lot of themes there of this kind of radical transparency, honesty, building trust, and also building trust with the customer. And so you've had such an incredible journey, and I know it feels like it's gone slow, Kevin, to you, but to most people, you're moving really fast. So my last question for you is, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself about 10 years ago, what advice would you give you back then?
Some version of don't be so stressed. It's so easy to say that on the other side of it, and we not only survived Mizzen and Maine, but we've thrived, and it's done really well. Going through it the first time was very, as a founder, was very, 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 very difficult. It has made the very difficult experiences of Harbor just much more manageable, knowing that we'll find a way. I don't even sort of pretend to say that in a state of Zen-like calm where, hey, I've got it figured out. It's all good. But just continue to retain perspective. I don't think I ever really lost my head, lost my cool, but definitely the stress. I think it took a couple years off my life. And with Harbor, I'm trying to do a better job of that. I've also just learned, there were times at Mizzen and Maine where I'd be emailing until midnight and then get up at 5 and just keep going. And I'm just not at my age capable of doing good work if I don't actually sleep. And I want to also set a great example for our team because we're trying to help shape parents and kids' lives. I have two young kids. I spend time with my kids. It doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of sacrifices that have to be made and phone calls that have to be made on vacation that I wish I could just turn my phone off.
Mhm.
Um, but I also am able to most of the time coach my kids' soccer game at 4:30 on a Thursday. Whereas I know a lot of people like if there's a deal that they work at a law firm and there's a deal happening, it does not matter what their personal schedule is. And
Mhm.
so there are trade-offs. I can't put on an out of office and say you have no way of getting a hold of me. I also am able to you know be a little bit more free.
Nice, nice. So that hindsight is 2020. Wishing we could all go back and tell ourselves to
Sure.
relax a little, it's going to work out. But
Yeah.
I find myself still giving myself that advice in the current moment of like, hey, whatever adversity or challenge you're facing, it's already worked out for you in the future. So how do you want to experience this and how do you want to
Yeah.
show up? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I'm glad that you have come to this place of wisdom of family is where you want to
Yeah.
spend your time and you get to allow yourself to do that. And you're
Yeah.
helping all
Got
these
to
other
keep
families.
reminding myself of that, but we
Yeah.
do our best.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing your experiences, your transparency and authenticity with us.
Thanks for telling the story. Appreciate it.